Hey guys, welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance. In this Reddit Ripestories video, they told me the company loses $50,000 for every single minute that machine sits idle. But then my boss demanded I violate safety procedures that would keep the machine down for 8 hours straight. I warned them, but they didn't listen, so I followed their rules to the letter. Let's dive right into the video. The first one is titled, "You want HR involved? Yes, you can have HR." So I work in radiology. About 15 plus years ago, I was working with a radiographer, X-ray tech, called Smith. Now, Smith had recently received 2 official warnings of duty, one for abusing the boss and one for abusing me. Smith was told to change their attitude and behave. Smith, however, went on a path of revenge that was endless. I was dying a death of 1,000 tiny paper cuts. Nothing terrible, but just lots of little things which I knew Smith had done, but I couldn't prove it. One Monday morning, one of the A&E doctors came over to complain about how poor the X-ray image quality was a couple nights ago. Smith goes over the roster board and sees my name corresponding to that shift. "You worked afternoon shift by yourself." Smith charges into the boss's office, demanding a full complaint process. Smith demands, since clearly the boss and I have it in for them, HR should run it independently. The boss tries to talk Smith out of it, but Smith basically says they don't trust the boss to deal with me fairly. The boss tells Smith he will hand it over, but be careful of what you ask for. Apparently, Smith was in quite a lather and so excited that they had gotten me. 2 days later, I'm being interviewed by 2 HR guys and an independent chief radiographer from another hospital. We go through each of the images and I agree the work is really poor. It's clear no one has actually looked too carefully at the paperwork with the X-ray images, and the HR guys finally ask, "Why did you do such poor work?" And I reply, I did not, and if they bothered to look on the online pay system, I had called in sick that day. In fact, Smith had done the overtime shift. They looked stunned. I reminded them I expected the same process for Smith. I also lodged an official complaint about false allegations being made by Smith for this case. Apparently Smith tried to stick to the roster, but they showed Smith their payslip plus that they had signed off on all the images, while HR was deciding what to do with Smith, fire them or not, and Smith had 2 more incidents at work and was eventually fired. And the next one is from r/MaliciousCompliance as well and is titled, "Boss demands I violate safety procedures and loses $24 million. So this happened about 15 years ago at a large manufacturing plant at which I was one of 120 industrial electricians, and this happened in the department in which I was primarily responsible. These jobs pay upwards of $30 per hour and I was making $34 per hour at the time. This was my career for decades before I retired last year. I now get a pension from them and fully paid healthcare. This was not just a run-of-the-mill job. This was something to take very, very seriously. Our safety administrator retired, so a new guy started and decided to audit all of the lockout-tagout procedures, LOTO, everywhere in the facility. This place employed 4,000 people and was over 1.5 million square feet, so it was a massive undertaking. Many of the machines in my department were large, multi-station transfer machines where the part goes into several drilling, milling, tapping, boring operations and are transferred to the next station in turn between operations. Basically, the operator loads a raw part into it and once it comes back around to him/her, it is finished. The cycle time for this machine was about 1 minute and was a key part in expensive final products costing upwards of $50,000 each. It was made clear to me that the company lost $50,000 for every minute the machine was idle as a way of instilling urgency as if I needed it. As I said, these machines had multiple stations that each had its own specialized operation to accomplish, all automatically. This of course involved many switches, buttons, computers, motors, encoders, drives and so on, all of which are used in industrial automation and sequencing. Usually, when an electrical part broke on a particular station, I would shut down the electrical power for that one station to perform my repairs and replacement. All was good and I could usually perform just about any repair within 15 minutes or less. The management people usually did not even know anything unusual happened, as the operators were on piecework and would often skip a break to make up for the shortfall, until the new LOTO procedures were released for those machines. The new procedure required anyone performing repairs to LOTO every station for every kind of energy potential. This includes electrical, pneumatic, hydraulic and gravity. Since this was a union facility, this required the services of an electrician, a plumber, a mechanic and a millwright. It also required something like 38 individual locks to be applied by the aforementioned skilled tradespersons. It also required about 4 to 8 hours of work to complete this task. Keep in mind, these were huge machines that would take up an area the size of a gymnasium and cost tens of millions of dollars to buy. When I saw the new LOTO procedure, I grabbed my boss and the production supervisor and showed it to them and explained in detail why this was ridiculous, unnecessary and unworkable. My boss got the safety administrator and we all had a conference and I was told basically that is the way it is. The very next day a type of switch called a proximity switch failed on one of these machines, normally a 5 to 10 minute repair, but cue the malicious compliance. I dutifully informed the production supervisor that he lost his machine for the rest of the shift and half the following shift. He chuckled and said, "Yeah, sure." I said, "Dude, I'm dead serious." I got my boss, told him I needed 38 LOTO locks, a plumber, a mechanic and a millwright, and he looked at me like I had 3 heads. Remember the conversation we had yesterday? It just got real. Show me why you need 38 locks. Okay, and I brought him to the machine, pulled the 10-page illustrated, notated, laminated LOTO procedure of the machine and counted where each and every lock needs to go. 38. And I need the other tradesman here as well. I figured the machine will be rendered safe by the end of the shift. Matt can do the repair and another 4 hours to remove the locks and set the machine up to be ready to be run by their lunchtime. Also keep in mind that there will be cribbing to make the gravity potential safe, and most locks need a special kind of hardware to apply to valves and other devices to be able to function correctly. Just fix it the way you usually fix it, my boss told me. Put it in writing, I said. Just fix the damn thing, was his unhelpful reply. I think you need to give it to me in writing, or you need to get my union rep here. Those are your 2 choices. I'm not gonna get fired over this. About this time, several men in suits and ties showed up to find out what the problem is, called into action by the production supervisor I previously mentioned. He and I had a great working relationship and he knew what was going down, so he started making phone calls when I let him know his machine was broke. To make a long story short, an hour-long meeting was called that included my union rep, the plant manager, and the new safety administrator, and the plant manager asked why the machine was still down. I calmly pulled out the written safety procedure the new safety administrator had forced us to follow and explained that I was doing exactly what I'd been instructed to do. The procedure required a full lockout, complete inspection of multiple electrical cabinets and written sign-off from safety before any temporary repair could be made. Normally I could have fixed the issue in about 10 minutes with a simple bypass repair that we had safely done hundreds of times before. But the new administrator had made it very clear, no exceptions, so I followed the procedure exactly, and that meant the machine sat idle while the inspection process dragged on, and by the time the paperwork was completed and the required safety sign-offs were obtained, nearly the entire shift had been lost. And the problem was that this machine was not just part of our regular production line, it was the final processing step for a contract shipment scheduled to leave that night. The product had already been manufactured, packaged and staged for transport, but without that final machine step it could not legally be shipped. Missing the shipping window triggered a penalty clause in the contract. The customer cancelled the order and invoked the clause that had been buried deep in the agreement, a $24 million contract forfeiture if delivery deadlines were missed, all because the machine sat idle waiting for safety paperwork. The plant manager stared at the safety administrator and asked a very simple question. Could this have been fixed earlier? I handed over the procedure they had forced us to follow. 10 minutes, I said. That's how long it would have taken the way we've always done it. The room went quiet. The safety administrator was thoroughly chewed out on the spot. Management finally admitted the procedure was unworkable, and I was given written authorization to perform repairs the way we had always done them before. Once the paperwork was signed, I fixed the machine. It took 9 minutes. Production restarted immediately, but by that point the truck had already left, aka the shipment, and the shipping window was gone, and the contract cancellation had already been processed. And according to the management's accounting department, the company had just lost $24 million because I followed the procedure exactly as I was instructed. And yeah guys, if there would ever be a subreddit that is called Nuclear Malicious Compliance, this story would probably fit the subreddit perfectly. The next one is titled Get Me Fired? Say Goodbye to Your Bonus and Promotion from r/pro revenge. And by the way guys, let me know in the comments, do you prefer pro revenge or malicious compliance? Also, while you're at it, please don't forget to like the video, because it would be amazing if we could reach 1000 likes. Thank you so much. This happened a good long while ago. I was in high school and got a job at one of the big box stores in the computer department. This store chain had an in-house technician department, which was always where I wanted to go. After busting my ass in sales for 2 years, putting up with rude customers, silly rules and all the other glorious trappings of retail job, I finally got a chance to be promoted to the technician department. It was not as glamorous as I thought it would be. I quickly found out that most of the repairs consisted of running the pre-packaged antivirus suite, updating Windows and doing data backups prior to wiping computers clean and reinstalling them. I always liked tinkering with hardware more, but since 80% of customers had laptops and those repairs were deemed too complicated by corporate, we would just send the laptops out to get repaired by the third-party vendor. It was still better than sales by a long shot, and we had a great team working in the technician area, except for one dude, let's call him Mike. He always behaved like his crap smelled like roses, and he was technically a lead technician, and even though that just meant he had a little more authority, he had access to a corporate account to arrange shipments of computers to and from our store, and he was acting like he was the manager of the department. Nevertheless, our actual manager was a splendid dude that took care of us, and as such, Mike's douchery did not bother any of us that much. Fast forward a little, and our awesome manager found a much better job. This opened up a spot for the manager, and since the whole store supervision was going through a shakeup, meaning the general manager was fired for embezzlement and all the people he hired, aka 90% of managers, were under review. This led to everybody trying their hardest not to F up, and the new GM decided that since our department was one of the best in the district, he would not try to hire an outsider, but will promote from within. Now, Mike was working at this store for almost 10 years at that point, and a couple of people had started working with him as sales associates, were by this point managers and assistant managers. One of them, Brittany, was an assistant manager in charge of customer service and checkout, and one of the conditions for Mike's official promotion to manager was to keep the first spot in the district performance-wise. One of the key metrics was the rejection rate from our third-party vendor. If we mistakenly sent them a software problem to fix, they would charge us extra. Mike started obsessing about the numbers, especially when it came to the rejection rate. He insisted that we would spend extra time to confirm issues, even when there were recalls from manufacturers for these items. I hated this bureaucracy, since it meant that people needed to wait almost the maximum allowed time to get their computers back, so a few times I skipped the extra diagnostics when I knew for sure the problem was hardware. One day, Mike decided to do an audit on all outgoing machines and found out that I've sent 4 units skipping his extra checks, and he told me that he will write me up for it, but when he tried, GM told him that he's not a manager yet, and I've shown to the GM that I followed the corporate procedure in diagnosing these units. I thought that was the end of this, but I was sorely mistaken. Mike hated that I showed the GM that Mike's procedure was inefficient and that he was denied power over me. About a month later, I got a call from Mike asking if I could come to the store on my day off because there was an issue with a customer. When I came in, I was greeted by Mike with a crab-eating grin, and he told me to wait in the back and not work on any computers. After about an hour, Mike and Brittany come in and ask me to head to the front office. They started an official write-up process and claimed that I've made a mistake creating a backup of customers' data and have placed a DVD with no data on it into the box that was returned to the customer and then wiped his PC clean. I knew that it was BS, since I always copy the data to an external hard drive, ran antivirus to make sure that nothing bad got copied, and then I burned DVDs. And yet when I asked to check the external hard drive, Mike said that due to my negligence I was not allowed back in the tech area. He went to check the hard drive and said there was nothing on it. At that point I knew he was BSing, but him and Brittany were hell-bent on completing the write-up. I have asked for a senior management to be present and was shot down again. It turns out GM was on vacation. They completed the write-up and told me that due to the egregious error that cost the company tens of thousands of dollars, I was not allowed to work in the tech room again, and I would be relegated back to the sales floor. I told them to shove it and submitted my resignation on the spot. I later found out that a week later they gave the customer the data that was on the hard drive all this time. Mike simply erased the DVDs. I grabbed the DVD RW by mistake for that backup and waited for the customer to come back and complain. I've also called the corporate HR line and told them what happened, and they said since I quit with a letter of resignation, they would not launch an investigation, but they've received and recorded my complaint. Through luck and the fact that I was a good hardware tech, I landed a job at a shop that did hardware repairs a week later and started in another week. Turns out this depot was the service center that covered the entire district, and they had the master contract with the big box chain where I worked. Since I have worked as the tech in that store, I was more than familiar with their labeling and ticketing system. For tracking purposes, the label included the store and technician number. After a couple of weeks, I gathered some goodwill at my new job and started trading the units with my colleagues to work on as many units from my old store as possible. Over the next 3 months, I made sure that every single unit sent in by Mike would come back with an extra charge. Also, it turned out that Mike, since he was in charge of shipping, would sometimes steal other technicians' tickets to boost his personal performance numbers to secure that manager promotion. Well, that bit him in the rear really hard. There was one week in particular when he sent in over 15 units out of 20 to get fixed, and 15 units came back with extra software charges. I've also kept detailed records that prove that the Mike did not follow his own policy of extra checks, and when the performance figures came out for that quarter, the store crashed into 5th place from 1st. Mike missed out on his promotion and a big bonus that was promised to him. A good buddy of mine from the store got the manager position a few months after that, and I've explained to him how to reduce the number of software charges to almost 0, so he looked like a superstar. Mike was the first relocated to lead technician, and then he was either let go or he quit. I'm not sure. Last I heard though, he started his own mobile technician business that folded after a year. However, what I didn't know is that this whole incident with Mike ducking up led the GM to review everything Mike did, including my write-up and dismissal, and as it turns out, they did not even register the write-up since I quit on the spot and buried it. The only way GM was able to find it is because of the HR complaint that was filed against both Mike and Disnii. Well, let me tell you, GM was not pleased that they went behind his back to get rid of someone and then fired Disnii as well. He was a very decent man who called me later that day and apologized and even offered me my old job back. I thanked him, but I was making more money at the new place and did not have to deal with customers, so I passed. And the next one is another super satisfying story, which is titled, "Want me to create the employee schedule when I know I'm getting fired? You got it." So this was about 20 years ago. I was working as an hourly manager at a popular American fast food place, franchise not corporate, and I'd been there several years and had accrued some vacation time. I requested a week off, months in advance, to go on a hunting trip a few states away with my dad, who taught me to shoot and hunt. The vacation time was approved by the general manager of the store, and I booked the trip, which was non-refundable. A week before I was due to go on vacation, the head office decided to replace my general manager with one from a different store they owned. The new general manager decided he had to assert his dominance by rejecting my vacation time and stated that he didn't have enough managers available to cover the shifts. I argued that the trip was already booked, but he was not hearing any of it. I liked my job and didn't want to leave, but there was no way I was gonna miss this trip. I tried everything to get him to approve the time off, but he scheduled me to work that week anyway. He said if I didn't work, I would be fired, and I told him I was going. I liked my coworkers and didn't want to screw anyone over by having shifts that needed covered, so I got them all covered a few days before I left. The general manager wouldn't approve them working for me and still said I had to work, and I was working the day before the trip, Friday, and he knew I was leaving the next day no matter what. Part of my job was to schedule the crew's shifts, and it typically needed to be done by Sunday for the following week, but on this day he said I had to have it done that day. So cue my malicious compliance. One additional thing to note here, this was about 15 years after the most popular girl's name was Ashley and the most popular boy's name was Michael. That means we had 8 Ashleys and 6 Michaels working there. So, it was normally trouble to keep from having more than 2 of them there at the same time because of labor laws, and that Saturday from 11 AM to 2 PM, lunch rush on the general manager's shift, every single one of them was scheduled at the same time. I can only imagine the chaos when he wanted one of them to do something. When I picked up my last check, another shift manager confirmed that it was as glorious and chaotic as I had imagined. And the next one is from r/MaliciousCompliance and is titled, "Won't let me help you with complying with DOT regulations? Have fun with that out-of-service ticket and fees, buddy." So this happened about 6 hours ago, and the fallout resolved roughly 3 hours ago. So I, a 38-year-old male over-the-road trucker, was at a truck stop about 150 miles from my destination and about 30 miles from a DOT way station. This other driver was getting fuel, and as he was, I noticed that he had hazmat on his trailer, as evidenced by the placards he was displayed on said trailer. And by the way guys, just to quickly interject here, is anyone else a big fan of American or European Truck Simulator? That game is fantastic. Anyway, upon further look however, I noticed that he had one placard displayed sideways, 2 others upside down, and 4 others mounted with duct tape. As someone who has been in the industry for over a decade, I knew the above was not correct, and I wanted to help him out, to make sure he didn't get dinged by the DOT, Department of Transportation, for incorrect display. I approached him, was friendly about it, and said that his placards were mounted wrong, and us being in my home state, I knew how DOT operated around there, told him he might want to fix it before he left. He asked me how long I had been driving, and I told him I had done it a decade. He scoffed and said that he'd been driving for only 2 years, but he knew better than me, and said while he appreciated my advice, told me to run my own truck the way I see fit and let me do my job my way. So I complied, wished him well, and went inside to grab something to eat. Fast forward a couple hours later, when I go take off, I head south, and right before I get to the state border, there's a truck waste station. As I'm approaching, my stomach starts turning cartwheels, forcing me to exit to use the restroom. Well, wouldn't you know, there in the parking lot is the guy I spoke to at the truck stop, ripping his placards off his truck, with a DOT officer standing beside him with new ones and a roll of clear tape. I asked him what happened, and he scowls at me and said, "I got an improper display out of service ticket." I asked him how much that was, and he said it was $2,500, 15 points to his CSA score, the scorecard used for truck driver evaluation, along with company evaluations, and 15 points to his company's CSA score. The officer approached me and asked me how I knew the guy, and I told the DOT officer that I tried to help him to avoid that situation, but he said he knew more than I did, despite me having 8 years more experience than he did. The officer laughed and told the guy, "Maybe you ought to listen to people, especially when they are trying to save you money." And yeah guys, I would say that's what you call instant karma. Thank you for watching, I will see you again tomorrow.